Human design is about showing you who you are and what parts of you you can trust. What inside of you is trustworthy and reliable and consistent, and what is conditioned, what is taken in and identified with. To identify with something is to say, that's me. Well, the premise of human design is that our whole lives we've been identifying things with things that are not us. And this is what we call the not self. So we've been identifying with, I'm the kind of person that XYZ, where these things that we're identifying with are conditioned into the areas where we're receptive. The openness in our chart, the undefined centers, the unactivated gates. So when you're looking at your body graph, what you're seeing is a blueprint of how you're designed, which tells you what is consistent in you, what is reliable, trustworthy, and then also what is inconsistent, and what is designed to receive from others. And all these areas of receptivity, life comes to us in these areas. It's a beautiful thing, you don't have to do anything because life is coming to you. It's bringing things to you. So you see someone with a undefined solar plexus. Well, the solar plexus is all about pleasure. It's about excitement. It's about adventure. Well, that person typically is going to be walking around offering pleasure to people, offering excitement, offering all these things which actually will come to them. The undefined ego is going around trying to prove things to others when actually it'll come to them. Undefined ego is making all these promises to others. It's trying to show how trustworthy and loyal it will be, when actually others will make promises to it, if they just allow them to. So this is really at the core of human design, is this idea of no longer making decisions from the open centers, which is to say making decisions from the mind. Human design is form knowledge. It's knowledge of the form. It's knowledge of the body. It's yin. So when you're looking at your chart, you can really see, those undefined centers. That's where the mind is going to jump in. That's where the mind is going to have its own strategies, different than the strategy of your type, the manifestor, the strategy of informing. Well, these mental strategies, the G center, the mental strategy of searching, the sacral center, the mental strategy of continuing, of not knowing when to stop, the not self theme of the undefined root, the mental strategy of hurrying, trying to be free of that pressure. The spleen, that mental strategy of holding on. So this is what you're looking at, is this dilemma or this conflict between the mechanical decision-making process that your body follows. In your case, by coming through clarity, by coming to clarity through an emotional wave, which we can talk about in a moment. But this whole mechanical process is the form side, and then there's the side of the mind, which is trying to control the decision making and thus control the life. And the mind is trying to exert this control through its promises. It's going to be promising, I can avoid anger if only. And you can fill in what that only is. I can avoid anger if only I keep searching. I can avoid anger if only I work faster. If only I take on more tasks. If only I don't let go. But let's talk about how you are designed first. Let's talk about the definition. And to me, the definition is not really the juicy stuff. That's what's funny. The juicy stuff ends up being the undefined areas, because those are the areas where we suffer. Those are the areas we have conflict, we have dilemmas. But the definition is nice as well, because sometimes it's harder to recognize. That's the interesting thing. I can talk to someone with an undefined ego and I can say, you're always trying to prove yourself. And they'll say, no, I'm not. And I'll say, it offends you to think that you're trying to prove yourself. And they'll say, that's not true. And then eventually they'll go, wow, I actually was offended that you said that about me, and I tried to prove you wrong. So they'll realize it, hopefully anyway. There's no guarantee. But with the undefined centers, it's possible to recognize these themes somewhat easily. With the defined centers and the defined channels, we're like a fish in water. We've been this way our whole lives. We've been, we don't have these properties. In some ways, we are these properties. Now, I don't mean to say that we aren't each unique and different, and that's actually part of it, is that the more we live out our unique characteristics by not making mental decisions, the more you wait for that emotional clarity and you follow the mechanics of your own type and your own design, you do differentiate in a way that's unpredictable, that does not line up with any of the generics or any of these. I can't generalize, or I can generalize about the channels, but that's not going to apply the more you live them out. You become unpredictable. But, nevertheless, I can tell you at a mechanical level some of the general themes of these channels. So as I mentioned, you have emotional authority, and you're an emotional manifestor, and that is because you have the 3536. That 3536 is an emotional manifesting channel. And so this is the channel that makes you an emotional manifestor. If you didn't have that, you'd be an emotional projector. So, being a manifestor has its own mechanics, where I see so many manifestors who are beaten down by life and have essentially, allowed themselves to be controlled and accepted that this is the way it is. And they're usually okay with it, and then periodically they have these outbursts of anger. Or they find some way to find peace, secretly. They live two lives. They have their outlet for peace, but then they also have this maddening life of essentially having to put up with others controlling them. I am thinking of one person in particular I know who is a 3536 emotional manifestor. And the more people try to control him, the more he starts doing unpredictable things without informing them, and he just vanishes, and he's gone. It's almost like a mechanical thing. It's like, I'm not going to be there if you're trying to control me, and if you're getting in my way. He confided in me. I sometimes am not sure where this business should go. He runs a business. And my business partner, I start to raise a question with him. What if it went in, what if this direction we've already decided isn't correct? My business partner thinks that means I want to go this other way. And I don't even know that I want to go that way. I just want, he just wants basically to be able to move forward in his exploratory phase. Because that's another theme of that 35-36. It's an explorer. It's an adventurer. It's a pioneer. It doesn't know where it's going. It's this journey. It's this adventure. It's part of the human experiential way. So it's the stuff legends are made of and stories. And, it's about going from a place of inexperience to a place of experience. And there's only one way to do that. It's to set out there and venture. And then that's what he wants to do. But everyone's always getting in his way. So this is a manifestor mechanic, that people are just kind of getting in your way. And they're preventing you from moving as quickly as you can. And in fact, it's correct for you to move quickly. It's not correct for you to slow down. So this is where informing comes in. With informing, they'll get out of your way. They just will. The earlier you inform. Now, informing is not the easiest thing. It's not actually a mechanical thing. It's the only strategy that doesn't have a mechanical basis. When we talk about generators responding, there's a mechanical basis to that, meaning something in their body responds. When we talk about reflectors, there's a mechanical process as the moon moves through the 64 gates. With projectors, there's a mechanical process where they light up and zero in on the other person's G center in that mutual recognition of the projector recognizing the other, recognizing them. But with a manifestor, there's no mechanic behind it. So the reason you inform, it's purely practical. It's practical because the earlier you inform, the more prepared people are, the more predictable you are. And, I've heard manifestors, in my opinion, get this wrong and say, oh yeah, I informed them they were fired. That's not informing. You inform months in advance. I also told a manifestor who didn't understand informing and was saying, informing doesn't make any sense, it's just made up, And I said, well, just imagine you're going to do some work on your house and you're going to have a lot of construction. It's going to be really loud and noisy. You tell the neighbors the moment you find out, the moment you decide you're going to do that construction. You tell them at the first opportunity so they have the most amount of time to prepare. This is your goal as a manifestor. Should be. Unfortunately, it's not. So there's a lot of impact out there in the world. There's a lot of angry people who make that manifestor angry by getting in their way, who disturb the manifestor and won't let them have their peace, and block them, because these people are being caught off guard. They're being surprised. They're being blindsided. And what this manifestor said? I wouldn't tell them I'm doing housework. I said, why not? Because none of their business. So the manifestor has this feeling of like, my business is my business, your business is your business, leave me alone a little bit. Not that they're all hermits, but that there's a certain amount of, I'm live and let live to you, so you be live and let live to me. And that's just not how it works with that manifestor aura. It's just not. Because the other person, they're doing something that has no impact on the manifestor. But the manifestor is obliviously impacting untold, countless people in their lives in ways they can't even fathom. They're not aware of their impact. When I first heard about manifestors, I looked up Orson Welles because I immediately knew he was a manifestor. I just had this feeling. Sure enough, he is, or was. Well, why did I think of that? Well, one, he has a commanding voice. He has a commanding presence. He just seems like it. But two, he did a radio broadcast of H.G. Wells. And he didn't sufficiently inform. And it was the War of the Worlds, and people thought it was real. And they committed suicide. He was responsible for a number of suicides by not correctly informing. So, the manifestor attitude is like, well, it's their own fault. It's their own fault, they didn't know. But what I'm saying is that the manifestor has a responsibility to inform because they impact a lot of people. The 3536 is a collective channel, which means it's all about sharing. It's about sharing your experience with others, going on an adventure together, being a pioneer. Good advice for someone with the 3536 in relationships is that they have to keep things exciting. Now, since you also have the 4037, which is also a channel that plays out in intimate relationships, you're going to need to support each other as well. The 4037 is tribal, so its keynote is support. But with that 3536, a very prominent theme here is it has to be exciting. It has to be exciting, you know. The thing would be to go on trips together, to go on trips with your partner, to go to new places, to have new experiences, to go on adventures, to go on trains and planes. And, you know, the 36 is the most sexual gate in all the whole body graph. That 36 is basically the gate of actual physical sex. And so it is very important, you know, for someone who has an undefined solar plexus and that, you know, they're going to experience fear through that gate. They're going to fear being inadequate sexually, or fear being boring. And of course, when it's defined, it doesn't play out that way at all. But there's still very much this dynamic of needing that intimacy. But because it's collective, it's not always personal. You know, it needs the experience, but it's different than having a deep personal connection to someone. It wants that experience, and that experience can go very deep. It can be a very intimate experience, but when it's over, it's over. This is the thing to realize about the collective experiential channels. The experiential is about the beginning, the middle, and the end. So experiences have a beginning, a middle, and an end. This is not logic where you're repeating something over and over and over again, trying to improve it, trying to get better at it. And this is what's so funny is people try to improve their intimate relationships in this way of being like, you know, they approach it as if it were logic. Like, I'm going to perfect it. I'm going to improve it. I'm going to get better at it. And that's just not the way it works in a relationship, because relationships are not logical. They're experiential. You're experiencing something with another person, and it's unique. You know, you're experiencing a unique connection to that person. So that 3536 is very much about having the experience. It's about the beginning, the middle, and the end of that experience. And when it's over, you don't want to go back in time to try to do it again. And it can be so bored, you know. It can be really bored if there's not enough excitement going on. So this is about having exciting adventures. And there can be a dilemma if people don't understand that it's not always personal. That you want to share. You want to share that experience with someone. You want to share that adventure with someone. But once you've shared that with them, that's it, you know. It's not sticky. It's not glue the way tribal is. Now you also have the 4037. That is tribal. So that 4037 is going to be a different way of bonding, which is going to be based around mutual support and long-term commitment and bargaining. It's the channel of the bargain. So you'll find that you have different kinds of relationships with different people, and some relationships might be based around this experiential, adventurous thing. Others might be based around mutual support. And you even have Gate 39 in your undefined root, which is in the individual circuit, and that's about romance. So you may experience some romantic relationships. It's funny to think that the tribal and the experiential collective are not romantic. I mean, they both claim to be, but the tribal is really about mutual support. It's an agreement. It's a bargain. I'll support you if you support me. I'll be loyal to you if you'll be loyal to me. I'll trust you if you trust me, you know, and what that agreement is, what that bargain is. And that 3536, it thinks it's romantic too, but what it really is exciting. oh, let's go to Paris together, let's go on this trip, let's have these new experiences, let's go skydiving, you know. But the romantic, which your gate 39 is in the romantic stream, that is like unrequited love and poetry, and you know, it's very much about the verbal and the auditory, because it's individual, and the auditory is so important for the individual. So your 35-36, this is going to be what connects your solar plexus to your throat, what makes you an emotional manifestor. This is an important dynamic, because it's going to be the primary wave that you're going to look for clarity. You know, it works very different than that 40-37, which will also operate, but the 40-37 is on a ratchet sort of wave, where it ratchets up and it ratchets up and it finally snaps. So that 40-37 is the theme of the straw that broke the donkey's back or camel's back, because it's something where it's just building and building and building and finally breaks. Whereas that 35-36 is kind of your more traditional idea of the wave, of getting really excited about something and then like losing that gusto, losing that steam, and being kind of down about it, and oh, it seems kind of boring, it's not exciting anymore. And then if it comes back to excitement, then you can find clarity. I mean, that's something I've heard about from the solar plexus folks about what clarity is it's kind of like you feel a certain way, then you start to feel the other way. Then if you go back to the first way, then you've been through one full cycle. The way one friend described about me was, she said, sometimes I get really excited, you're my friend, and I really want to see you, and then I get kind of negative about you and think, oh, you're not that good of a friend, and I forget about you. And then a couple weeks later, I'm thinking about you again, and I really want to see you. And that's when she gets the moment of clarity that I actually am one of her good friends, that I actually am somebody she wants to have in her life. Only after that time has passed. Only after she's gone from, wow, that person's great, to that person's not a very good friend for me, and then come back around to being like, wow, you know what, I actually do really want to see them. So it's a case of going through a complete cycle, going through the excitement to the boredom, back to the excitement, or vice versa. Something's so boring to you, you start a job and it's so boring, but don't quit, just wait and see if you find something that's exciting in it. And then if it goes back to boredom and you're really not enjoying it, well, then you can quit, because you'll have clarity about it. You'll be sure that there's actually nothing exciting there. So the idea here is just when you preemptively make decisions impulsively, you're always going to wonder, was there some other side to it that I didn't see? And there probably was. But once you've experienced both sides, then you can have clarity on it. There are two main pitfalls to having the solar plexus defined. One is not expressing or feeling or letting the emotions flow through you. So holding them in, just repressing them, holding them tightly in and not letting them out. Not even realizing you have them. Other people who are undefined in their solar plexus will notice it. They will, feel suffocated by it, but you'll be oblivious to these repressed emotions that are being held back, that aren't being expressed. So that's one trap and one pitfall, not letting the emotions flow as quickly as they would like, slowing them down to a snail pace so they come out in drips, and then the other is going to be the opposite extreme, being really impulsive and being really reactive, and you have an emotional reaction and you immediately expel and discharge all that emotional energy. So those are the two extremes, and either way you're going to run into problems, because neither of those are waiting for clarity. So when you're waiting for clarity, it's not just, on the one hand it is just waiting. I had a friend ask me, how do I know if I reached clarity? And I said, well, you haven't. Knowing that you have it is part of clarity, Clarity is when it's obvious. It's obvious that you would never be happy at that job. It's obvious that you would never be happy in that relationship. Or it's obvious that you would. Or it's obvious that you would, it just fits. Like, it just makes all the sense in the world. Like, Should I buy that car or not? Do I have clarity about this yet? No, if you're asking that question, you don't. And then the moment you go, of course I would buy that car, why wouldn't I? Then you have clarity. So the clarity comes when it's obvious. But while you're waiting, on the one hand, yeah, it is waiting. It's just waiting, go for a walk, write in a journal, do something else, come back to it later. But on the other hand, you can actually be savoring the emotions in that process. You can savor them. And it's not the easiest thing to do, Some of them, maybe, yes, some can be savored, but some can be easily savored, but others, can you savor melancholy? Melancholy should be savored. It should be savored in the same way that we savor happiness, or the same way we savor excitement. To really experience it. Like, we have these events happen to us, but are we really experiencing them? Are we digesting them? Are we processing them? That's what the solar plexus is. It's about this digestive process, this savoring process that sits with things and, is a midwife for them, so to speak, to be able to birth these feelings out into the world, or whatever the outcome of those feelings are. There can be grieving processes, there can be birthing processes, there can be all kinds of emotional processes that need to be essentially watched over and sat with and experienced. And they're meant to be experienced, and the more present you are with that experience, the more you're able to find that clarity and know that you have that clarity because you've been there with that experience, and you haven't tried to escape from it, or you haven't pushed it back or held it back, or you haven't tried to discharge it too quickly. You just let it be and sat there with it. So your 4037 is also an emotional gate connecting the ego to the solar plexus. And as I mentioned, it has a ratchet wave. This is, things building up and then breaking. It's not the same as the individual spike wave where things build to a fever pitch and then spike. This is a little different. This is more like you can put up with it until you can't. You can handle it until one day you can't handle it anymore, This is something someone said months ago that just sits there and percolates, and finally it comes out, and it's built up and it's built to its fever pitch, and so the thing to do is to not rush to discharge those feelings at the breaking point, and also not to fight them and hold them back, but to sit with them and to allow that long process to be and to operate as it will, and to notice it, and to be awake for it. So that 4037, it's tribal. It's about bonding with the other in a way that's supportive. 40 is the gate of aloneness, and 37 is the gate of family. So the bargain, when those two come together, says basically, I will do this for you as long as I get my time too. I'll do this for the family, but I also get to have my own time. I'll work for this many hours, but I get to have this many hours of freedom. That 40 is a love gate, which is always trying to work for others. I'll be your mule. I'll work for you. And I'll work for you as a way of showing you how much I love you. And you'd better appreciate me too, because, it's all part of the bargain. So having that 40-37, in some ways, you'll determine what's fair. If you're with a partner who doesn't have that gate, who doesn't have that channel, they might think, well, this isn't fair, or how come that person gets to choose what's fair and I don't? But it's because when you have a tribal channel like this, particularly this one, you're deciding what's fair. You're determining what's fair. You set the standard of fairness. So that 40-37, the 37 is the gate of affection. So part of the bargain also is, I'll work for you, but you'll give me affection. I'll do this for you, but you'll appreciate me. And it's very loyal, and it makes its promises, and it keeps its promises. It doesn't make promises lightly. It's trustworthy. It has the capacity to work hard, to build something together. It's tactile. Part of being tactile, all tribal circuitry is tactile. And when you have a sexual stream like this, that 4037, that's like the couple that one person puts the hand on the other's shoulder and they say it all with just a touch, or a handshake, or a hug, or all the different ways we can communicate with touch. So this is very important to access that tribal energy, If that were your only channel, I would say that to reach an emotional clarity about something, you might find emotional clarity through touch. This is especially true for somebody who has 59-6, which is also tribal. My advice for them is always, if you're not sure how you feel, have someone touch your shoulder, or if your partner has that, then touch their shoulder or something like that, because then it'll help them access their feelings about a situation. You have two channels connecting the throat to the ajna. They're both collective, but one is experiential, also called sensing, and the other is logical. The experiential is also called the abstract. It's called the abstract sensing circuit. So, starting with that's the 1156. The 1156 is the channel of curiosity. It's about having ideas and expressing those ideas. And it's about sharing stories. It's a great storyteller channel. Because it's a projected channel, it needs to be invited to share its stories, or else it can be annoying to people, like all projected channels. And it can find a lot of bitterness when it's trying to tell those stories and nobody's interested, because they just don't recognize it and they just don't want it to intrude on them, and But when it is invited and when it is recognized, it's amazing that the stories that I can tell are so full of wisdom that has been abstracted from the past. And this is, when I hear the term abstract in relation to the circuitry, I think of it like extracted, like it's extracting something from the past. It's extracting something, some essence of a particular story that happened. And so when it's telling that story, it's telling it in a very particular way, where it's extracted certain things from it, You have your own experience of what that story was. And even that experience will change. If you tell the same story year after year, you'll tell it in different ways as you abstract different things from that experience. So that's a totally unconscious channel for you. So this is an automatic thing. When you see unconscious channels that are only in the design, they're essentially autonomous. They're automatic. You notice them, but you often notice their results, or you notice after the fact. I was just saying, you notice the unconscious channels after the fact. So that, 1156, you might notice that you've been telling stories, or you might notice the stories are kind of coming out of you without consciously willing them, or consciously being aware. And then on the 1762, on the other side, so these are both connecting the head and the throat, this is going to be logic circuitry. And so anytime you have two channels connecting the same two centers, it does have an interesting dynamic where those two channels won't operate at the same time, basically, and you will tend to prefer one over the other. And since you have that 3536, I'm going to guess that you prefer the 1156, because those are in the same circuit group. But be that as it may, you also have this 1762. And so the 1762 is in the logic circuit group, and it's going to be expressed as formulas It's going to be, so the difference between logic and the abstract is that the abstract has a single experience one time, then it continues to revisit that experience and to extract different things from it. Logic is about perfecting. It's about making more efficient. It's about doing something over and over and over again, learning how to make it better, revisiting it, experimenting. I mean, there's a lot of differences. The experiential, the abstract, like that, 1156 you have, that's going to be looking at the past. It's going to be looking at past experiences. So it's related to memory. And it's related to these singular experiences that you've had in the past that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And they became stories, and you can retell those stories and get different things from them. Well, logic is actually looking at the future. So that 1762 is going to be talking about what's probably going to happen, or what might happen. It's going to be predicting. And it's typically thought of, it's the gate of opinions connecting to the gate of details. So the way I usually hear this channel is that it's a channel of essentially sharing your opinions with others, of voicing your opinions, of voicing what you're thinking about. And just like that storytelling channel is going to be a projected channel, needs to be invited, so too the 1762 needs to be invited, or else your opinions won't be welcome. People will respond poorly to you sharing your opinions unless they've invited you to do so, and unless they recognize that you have an opinion about something. They notice you have an opinion about it. They ask you what that opinion is because they're genuinely curious about your opinion. And at that point, you can successfully convey your opinions. Now, the last of the defined channels here, the 6124. This is your only individual channel. Individual channels carry with them a frequency of melancholy. So they carry with them a melancholic waiting for something to change. The 6124, the 61 is fascinated by the mystery, and it wants to know. And that 24 is about returning to the same thing over and over and over again. So with that 6124, you have a mind that'll just keep going back to the same thing again and again and again, keep returning to it. And the melancholy is that each time it comes back, nothing's changed. It's returning to it, waiting for the change to happen. And once something has changed, it's no longer melancholic, but it can get in this loop. And so that melancholic loop, the thing to recognize here is that it is a creative melancholy. It's a melancholy that is fertile, that births new knowledge, but it's not always the most comfortable thing, because you can feel like you're stuck on something. The 24, it's like having a song stuck in your head. In fact, quite literally, with this gate, you may periodically get songs stuck in your head, like more than other people do. What's funny for me is I basically never get songs stuck in my head, and when I start to hum songs to myself, I notice, I even noticed once I was in the car with two other people who both had gate 24, and I was just humming the song. It's stuck in my head. They had songs stuck in their head. They're always getting songs stuck in their head. One of those things where as soon as one person was finished playing the song in the car, the other person said, "Oh, no, I have to listen to this. I have to hear this. I haven't thought about that song for years, but it's just going round and around in my head." And then we picked up a friend. And we're just sitting there in the car. We're taking off, and not 2 minutes goes by before the friend goes, "God, I can't get the song out of my head. Can you?" So they just entered into the aura, and they're in this enclosed space with someone with a 24, and suddenly they're looping on something again. So that 24 is really a gate of looping, and that channel is about returning to something again and again and again until it changes. So these are the channels you do have. Now, these are the areas of consistency in your chart, the areas that you can rely on, that you can depend on. But this isn't really where the juice of the work is. I mean, you get to live out these aspects of yourself. The more you wait for clarity, the more you live following your mechanics and live as a manifestor, meaning like you actually initiate and go as fast as you need to go and have creative bursts of energy that come from a place of clarity. So you're comfortable knowing that you've seen all sides of an issue before acting. You've arrived at your own personal truth through a process. Well, when that happens, you're going to be living out these channels, and you're going to be living them in ways that can't really be predicted by these generalizations. I don't really know what the 6124 is going to look like beyond just kind of listing these characteristics of somebody who, wants to know the answer to the mysteries, is thinking about unanswerable questions, is thinking about trippy, mysterious thoughts, and, returning to things again and again, and stuff like that. I don't really know what it's going to look like besides that. These are just kind of general characteristics, but as you live yourself, you really get to live out something that's not a generic, that's not general, that's completely specific to you. But the thing that's helped me the most, and I think is the most crucial tool for the mind in all of this, to help kind of wake up the passenger, so to speak, so you can watch these things at work, is actually looking at the areas of openness in your chart. It's looking where you're undefined, looking at the not-self themes of the open centers, because this is going to detail how your mind works when it's trying to make decisions. This is going to give, a very detailed understanding of the mental strategies and the mental decision-making that have essentially, been not only a survival technique for each of us in our lives, but for all of humanity for 90,000 years, or however long it's been since we developed strategic, self-reflected consciousness in this way, like self-aware, consciousness that's able to strategize. So there's a purpose for all this. The reason the mind is so good at this stuff is because it's been the only way we could survive for years and years and years. So if we didn't want to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, we had to use our mind to make decisions. So the mind, runs on a fuel of fear so that it can learn how to not be eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, stuff like that. But in the more recent evolutionary history of humanity, we can now trust our bodies to make these decisions. And the mind can give up its control and no longer be doing double duty of being both the inner and the outer authority. And it can start to just be the outer authority. And outer authority is really just expressing, conveying information, doing what I'm doing right now. I'm being an outer authority. I'm just conveying information. So that's something I always notice on these human design groups. People ask a question, and the answer is always, just follow strategy and authority. Okay, well, if it's a decision, yeah. If they're saying, should I take this job or not, then that's the great answer. But if they're saying, why is it that human design says this and this and this? Why is it that that's the way that is? What's your experience with this? How do you, asking for people to share their experiences? Or maybe they just need support. Or maybe they're feeling disempowered and they're wondering if others are empowered in certain ways. Or however, there's all these different ways we can communicate with each other and convey information to each other that have nothing to do with making decisions. I'm not making any decisions while I'm talking to you here. I'm just conveying information. I made a decision to give this reading, but I didn't make a decision to decide to start talking about, I don't know, the open centers or, any of this. This is the realm of outer authority. So my point is simply that outer authority is what the mind is good for. And so as we're learning about how the mind functions, we're going to be looking at the not-self themes. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that these themes get very dark because, all the suffering of the world comes out of these undefined centers. Really, you look out at the world, 65% of people have undefined ego. So much suffering, people feeling unworthy, feeling unloved, feeling undervalued, feeling like they don't deserve to be loved, all this stuff. 50% out there with an undefined solar plexus, afraid to be authentic, afraid to show who they really are, afraid to be genuine, keeping everyone at arm's length, terrified of intimacy, all this stuff. So it's very negative, there's a lot of negative stuff out there. But these are also the areas where we actually have the greatest potential for wisdom. And this isn't just paying lip service as some kind of pat on the back, like they're there. This is real. This is really where you become wise. Because people who have the defined centers don't necessarily know about those centers. They just are them. They just live them. They just put that frequency out there. But they're not learning about it. That's why I always find it funny when there's like a human design group for people that have a certain center. And they're like, only if you have that center defined can you join. It's like, you guys don't really know what it's like having that center. I got in a conversation with someone about this where he was saying the proof of the coffee is in the tasting, or the experience. I forget the exact way he said it, but it's something like, you have to have it to know what it really is. And I was actually going to say the opposite. You don't have it, so you actually know what it is. If you have it, you are it. It's not something you know, it's something you are. So anyway, all of this is just to say that these undefined centers are really about the areas of life where we take in the other, where we learn about the other, we learn about these things, we become wise in these areas. It's where we're receptive, and it's where we learn the most. Now there's a hierarchy to the undefined centers, from strongest to weakest in terms of their not-self impact. So the ego is the absolute strongest, but you have defined ego. So you aren't susceptible to that impact. I mean, the world is. You look out there at the world, 65% of people with undefined ego. Oh, they're highly susceptible to its not-self themes of trying to prove themselves and improve themselves. And then the next strongest is the solar plexus. But you also have that defined. So actually, your core not-self theme, or core foundational not-self theme of an undefined center, is the G center, which is the third strongest impact in the overall hierarchy and is the strongest impact for you. So this is going to be the core theme behind all of the other not-self. And so it's something to realize also that the not-self is all about avoiding, in your case, anger. It's avoiding anger. And so it's interesting because people hear the not-self theme of the type and they go, oh, I'm a manifestor. My not-self theme is anger. Well, that's true. But the not-self theme is also avoiding anger, in the sense that we've become so shell-shocked, almost, traumatized by a lifetime of meeting resistance, that we expect that not-self theme. We expect anger, and we're constantly trying to circumvent that or trying to preempt it and going, well, if only I do this, I can avoid anger. Or for the generator, if only I can do this, I can avoid frustration. The projector, I can avoid bitterness, and so on. So it's an interesting point that the not-self theme of the manifestor is not just anger. The not-self theme is also avoiding anger, expecting anger, expecting people are going to get in your way, expecting people are going to try to control you and slow you down, and you can connect these not-self themes. You can kind of string them together and synthesize them with the keynotes of the undefined centers. So we can say at the core of the mental strategy, the core of the not-self decision-making process for you is going to be I can avoid anger if I find the right place, the right people, if I have the right direction in life. I have to find it. I have to search. That not self of the G center is all about searching. And if I find it, then I can have peace. So this is all about finding peace, searching and looking for it and going out there and, feeling this responsibility that you have to find. Well, in your particular case, you have 3 gates to find. So with gate 7, this could be finding a place where you can lead, finding a place where you can be in charge. That's one interpretation of it, since gate 7 has to do with leadership. Finding a place where you can direct, where you can give direction. Gate 1 is all about creativity, finding creative expression, finding the place where you can have creative expression, where your creative expression is recognized and where you're able to be creative, and trying so hard, if only I can find the right people that understand and recognize my creativity, if only I find the right place where I have that art studio or that music studio or that writer's desk or whatever it is for your particular mode of creative expression, then I can have peace. I'll avoid anger by finding the right place where I can be creative. I'll avoid anger by finding the right people who I can be creative with. I'll avoid anger by finding the right place where I can be in charge. And then you have 25, so it's about innocence as well. I can avoid anger if I can find a place where I don't have to have any motives, where I can get away from those ulterior motives. I think of gate 25, innocence, as kind of being like no motives, no agenda, this kind of Eden. If you can find this Eden where people are pure, where they're not Machiavellian, where they're not, they don't have ulterior motives, they're not political, they're just being themselves, pure, authentic. So you can see how these tie together, this searching, and the corollary of that is feeling lost and lacking that sense of belonging and wondering if you're in the right place, if you're with the right people, if you're in the right job, if you have the right, on and on and on. I think of the undefined G center as like grass is always greener. It's permanently grass is always greener as long as you're making decisions with it. As long as you're making decisions from that mental strategy of the undefined G center, you'll never have the right place, because it'll always be this question of, is there somewhere else that I really belong? I don't feel I belong here. I don't feel I fit in here. I don't feel like I'm one of them. So this is the core of your not self decision making. But it's not what other people see. They don't look at you and see, here's somebody who's searching, here's somebody who's striving, here's somebody who's looking, trying to find these things. Here's someone who's lost. They don't look at you and see a lost soul. They're actually going to see the least impactful center for you. So they're going to look at you and they're going to see that undefined sacral, because that's the lowest impact of the centers that you have undefined. And that undefined sacral is willing to overcommit. It's willing to take on more work, to do more, and when it's combined with the root, that's going to work harder and faster. That undefined sacral is going to work harder than everyone else, and that undefined root is going to work faster than everyone else. So they see, here's somebody who's willing to work harder and willing to work faster. And because you have gate 3, that gate 3 in the sacral is going to be that not self theme that they see. Here's somebody who's willing to work hard to try to bring new things into the world. Here's somebody who's overextending themselves, who doesn't know when to stop, who's overcommitting, who's overextending, who's working really hard to bring new things in. They're having a lot of difficulty bringing those new things in because, hey, new things, changes are not easy. It's not easy to bring those in. It's a struggle. So here's somebody who's willing to struggle to usher new things into the world. But beneath that, behind that, hidden from view, is this whole feeling, if I overcommit, and if I do all this hard work for them, and I become a super slave for them, and I work harder and I work faster and I bring all these new things into the world, then I can find my right place. Then I can find my right people. Then I'll find where I belong. I'll find the love that's correct for me. I'll find out who I truly am. And then I can have peace. And then I'll avoid anger. But if I don't do that, if I say no to them, if I go home early, if I don't overcommit, if I don't work fast, they're going to get in my way and I'm going to be angry, So it's a carrot and a stick. The not self is the carrot and the stick. And it's always offering this carrot forever out of reach. And then it's boinking us on the head with the stick every time we go for it. And we think that if we stop doing it, we're going to get hit by the stick. That's the funny thing, You have undefined sacral, so you shouldn't be working really hard. The question is, do I know when enough is enough? You don't have to, there's nothing internally in you that's going to say that there's enough. So you're going to have an ability with that not self mind to keep going, like that Energizer Bunny thing, and then just crash because you've used up energy you don't have, basically. And the fear is, if you don't burn out in that way, that people are going to get in your way and you're going to experience anger and you're not going to find the right people and places for you, that you have to keep looking and searching. So you can see how this undefined G center, it's really like core. It's the core fundamental not self thing that ties to this avoiding anger. I can avoid anger if I find the right place. I can avoid anger if I find the right love. Searching for love, identity, direction, sense of place, sense of belonging. And I can find those things, but only if I work really hard for them. And only if I work really fast. And then you can start looking at the others. For instance, the spleen. Well, the other, I should say. And that spleen's going to be only if I don't let go. I can find it, but I can't let go. I can't give up. And so that spleen is going to hold on to anything that promises peace. Anything that promises a sense of direction. Anything that promises a sense of identity. Well, yeah, maybe that's bad for me. I don't know if it's good or bad for me, but I know that it makes me feel a sense of belonging, so I'm going to hold on to it. And I know that if I have a sense of belonging, I'm not going to, or I guess talking specifically about your spleen gates, something that's going to give you the feeling of being able to be creative and to be in charge and to be innocent and to have this innocent, creative utopia kind of place. You're going to hold on to things that give that to you, whether they're good or bad for you. I mean, this is, of course, the not-self. On the other hand, there's going to be this tremendous ability for wisdom to know what's good and bad for you, to know what's healthy and unhealthy. And that, of course, happens when we stop making decisions, so we can actually start to watch, through these centers. But you can see how this surface of I'm available for you, that's the sacral. That undefined sacral is going to say, I'm available for you. Because it doesn't know when it's not available. It doesn't know when it doesn't have enough energy for something. So it's going to say it's available. It's going to commit to being available. It's going to work for other people when it doesn't really have the energy to do it. And so it's going to say, I'm available for you. And then that root is going to say, I'm going to work hard, fast, I guess, maybe fast more than hard. I'm going to work as quickly as possible to be free from this pressure, because it's always hurrying up, trying to be free from the pressure. It's getting all amped up, charged up. And then the spleen is going to hold on to things. It's going to stay at the job, even though it's not good for it. It's going to stay in a relationship, even though it's not good for it. It's clinging to anything that gives it. Because I think of the G Center not just as love, identity, direction. I think of it as career. I think of it, in your case, having very much to do with creativity, something that helps tie to your creative expression as an individual, since you have gate 1 there in the G Center. It can have to do with leadership, because you have gate 7. And maybe leadership is not so conventional here, understood in like being a director of an institute or something. Maybe it's just being in charge of something, but at the very least, it's feeling like it's being an alpha of some kind, like being a boss, kind of. And then that 25 is not wanting to have motivation, not wanting to have to be political about things. It's like something pure. It's like you're looking for something pure, not stained by all of the greed and the vices and the, ulterior motives and the politics. And so, that G center is searching for that. It's searching for that ability to be creative, for that person you can be creative with, for that place you can be creative with, for that job you can be creative in, the place you can be creative in, all these things. So these are going to tie together, and you're going to have basically this fundamental core, it's going to be a core temptation, we can almost say, of the not self, constantly tempting you. Oh, do you want to avoid anger? Do you want to avoid being angry because people are getting in your way and because you're not able to do what you want to do? Well, here's how you do it. You just have to find the right place. And so it tricks you into searching. But all of the undefined centers are meant to be receptive. If you're looking for a job, you don't go looking for a job. I mean, you're not designed to. You're designed to kind of tell some of your friends, hey, I'm thinking of getting a job, then they bring certain jobs to you. Or you're looking for an apartment, well, instead of looking, tell some friends, hey, I'm thinking about getting an apartment. I mean, you can say you're looking for an apartment, but, hey, I'm looking for an apartment. Do you know of any? And then they bring them to you instead of actually going out there and hunting it down and cold calling and all that. Because the thing is, it's all about being receptive. You have an undefined center, you're here to receive those things. And it's so hard for people to do, Undefined ego has a hard time receiving praise. Undefined solar plexus has a hard time receiving pleasure or receiving excitement. The G center is going to be here to receive direction. It doesn't have to find its own direction. And when you're so busy trying to find your own direction, you're ignoring all of the opportunities for direction that come to you. So instead of trying to find it, the only thing you have to do is be discerning, which actually can be kind of hard. It's not necessarily hard to notice. It's hard in the sense that, what if you've been best friends with someone for 20 years or 10 years or however long, and then you realize that they're consistently taking you to the wrong place. Because it's one of those cycles where the right people take you to the right place where you meet more of the right people. And the wrong people take you to the wrong places where you meet more of the wrong people. So practicing discernment, thinking about where, even at a very simple level, what restaurant did that friend take you to? Was it a restaurant where you felt physically comfortable? Did you enjoy the frequency of that restaurant? It's becoming really attuned to the feeling tone of a place, the frequency of a place. This is the gift of the undefined G center, becoming very sensitive to place. And it works at the macro level of what country or state or city you live in or what neighborhood you live in, down to the micro level, beyond even what house or what room in the house, down to what chair you're sitting in. All of these things, it's the G center is very sensitive to environment. And being sensitive to environment, it's essentially going to be incredibly important for you that you have the right people in your life to take you to those right environments. Instead of trying to find them yourself, you simply have someone and they take you there. You can even initiate it if it's out of clarity. You can even come to a point of clarity where you say, you know what, I really want to find a good restaurant. Do you know of any good ones? And you ask a friend or something, and then they take you there and you notice how you feel there. And maybe it's right up your alley and it's just your thing. In that case, they're a really good person for you because they're going to keep taking you to the right place. And the kind of people that you meet in the places they take you, the places they've shown you, are going to be the right people for you. And those people will continue taking you to the right places. But if they take you to a place and somebody spills a drink on you and someone on the table next door is being really obnoxious and you feel really uncomfortable, and you feel alienated and left out, and you just feel like, why am I even here? And you get really angry there. It's not the right place and it's not the right person. And that's what's difficult to accept. Sometimes we think it's the right person for us and they're just not. And we can't deny it once we really notice where they're taking us. Because it really is in that frequency that you take in from that place. So, people and place, so important for the undefined G center. So very important. And instead of looking for the right people and looking for the right place, you let them come to you. And you just have your eyes open. You just watch. You become aware of these things. And at that point, then you're able to reach your own emotional clarity or process, coming to terms with that. Someone that you've been very close to, and you realize they keep taking you to the wrong place again and again and again, and it's just wrong for you to be there. Well, you can come to a point of emotional clarity about how to proceed in that situation. And typically that means they're not the right person for you, and a difficult decision has to be made. So, all of these undefined centers have the potential for wisdom, and they start as dilemmas and as places of suffering because you feel lost, suffering because you're biting off more than you can chew and feeling exhausted, suffering because you're holding on, suffering because there's pressure and you're in a hurry to get free of that pressure. And they become wisdom. Wisdom about who does have a strong sense of identity or not. Who is healthy or not. That's the spleen, That undefined spleen is so good at noticing others' well-being. I mean, these undefined centers also become places of material wealth. With undefined sacral, you can help people stop. You can help them stop things. You can sell them, stop doing that. Stop overextending yourself, or stop doing things that aren't satisfying to you. You can help all of those sacral people out there. With that undefined spleen, you can help all those splenic people out there. You can help them become aware of their health. So each of these centers can really take in the other, and it can tell a lot about the other. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, and I'll close on this, is the profile. Your profile has to do with the roles you play, the masks you wear. What roles do you play for others? What roles do you play to strangers? What roles do you play to loved ones? What roles are you playing as yourself? There are collective roles, there are tribal roles, there are individual roles. And these are all encapsulated in the profile. So your profile is the 5-1. And what this means is that your conscious line, the line that your personality, sun, and earth were on at the time of your birth, is the 5th line. And your unconscious line, your design, sun, and earth, is the 1st line. So there are 6 lines, and this comes from the I Ching. These 6 subdivisions of each gate. And the 6 lines tell a story. The 1st line is the foundation. The 2nd line just wants to live it. It doesn't want to study it anymore. It's like a house almost. The 1st line is the foundation of the house. The 2nd line is the main floor where people are living and they have their certain amount of activity. The 3rd line is like the stairs up to the 2nd floor. And the 2nd floor is more transpersonal in nature. It's about the other. It's about seeing out and looking out to the other. So the 4th line is the foundation of the 2nd floor. And the 5th line is the only truly transpersonal line. The 6th line is like the roof. So the way I describe the difference in the 5th and 6th lines is these count up from the bottom. If you're looking at the hexagram, they start at the bottom and they go up. And people ask, well, isn't the 6th line the most transpersonal line then? Because it's at the top of the hexagram. No, it isn't. It's like after the transpersonal line. It's after the sort of climax or tour de force, moment If it were an opera, the fifth line would be the real climax of the opera, and the sixth line would be the denouement. And so the sixth line is like after the major transpersonal energy, which is really all about reaching the other and connecting to the other. So being a fifth line, you have a very special role to play, which is the only truly transpersonal line. And the 5-1 is the only transpersonal profile. By the time you get to the 5-2, then on to the 6-2 and the 6-3, you've already passed the peak. The 5-1 is the transpersonal profile par excellence. The fifth line is the exalted line. This goes back thousands of years to the I Ching. So the fifth line has a very special role to play. I mean, each line has a special role to play, but the fifth line is the chosen line to represent the entire energy of that hexagram and to transmit that energy out to the world. And so the fifth line has a lot of pressure. It's different than the other lines. The first line just wants to know what it's all about. It just wants to learn the foundations of it. The second line just wants to live it. It says, leave me alone, I'm busy living it out. You know, each of these lines kind of progress in a sequence. The third line wants to try it out. There's that trial and error, figuring things out, seeing what they're all about. And it keeps going, and by the time you get to the fifth line, it has to be ready for prime time, so to speak. It has to be something that you can put out to the world and universalize. So what does it mean to universalize? It means that anyone can pick it up and use it. Any stranger can come along and can be reached and can be affected. And so the fifth line has a way with strangers. The fifth line has a way of reaching strangers, of connecting to strangers. It has a way of cutting through their defenses, of penetrating them, and getting past their defenses to a place of trust. And therefore there's a special pressure on the fifth line, because if it missteps, the other feels betrayed. They feel like, I trusted you, I let you in, I exposed myself to you, I was vulnerable to you, and you didn't give me something practical. You didn't give me something to actually help me, so I feel betrayed. So practicality is key to the fifth line. You have to give people something practical. If what you give them is not practical, they're not just going to keep it to themselves, they're going to tell everyone. The fifth line lives and dies by their reputation. And they have the strongest impact to strangers. They have the strongest impact when the other is in crisis. The fifth line is a general, kind of in the sense of the Greek general who was not working all the time. The general was retired and would come out of retirement to take on a particular task during a time of crisis and to lead to victory. The fifth line has a theme of clutching victory from the jaws of defeat. I think about a jazz musician who goes out on stage, and they're a fifth line. There's so many expectations put on them, because everybody puts expectations on the fifth line. And timing is so important for the fifth line. Timing of when to act, of when the pressure is greatest. Because if the fifth line is just acting just off the bat, it doesn't have an impact. So the fifth line actually waits for the pressure to build. So that musician's on stage and the audience is going, is this it? Is this all we're going to get? This is all they're giving us? They're playing very simple stuff and they're not really risking anything and they're not going out there. And the musician is actually building that pressure. They're building the pressure to succeed. They're making it look like they're going to fail. And then right at that critical moment where the audience is getting fed up, the musician does something amazing. And the audience is floored. And they're all really impressed, and they all go home and tell everybody they know what an amazing musician it was. So the fifth line is building up that pressure and jumping in during that crisis that they'll create themselves if they have to. Because in that time of crisis, in that time of chaos, they're able to jump in and give something practical and give something helpful. The fifth line can't affect people when they're not in crisis. They really can't. Now, being a 5-1, that first line is also a very important line in terms of influence. You influence others through the first line in areas where you're an authority. The first line's an authoritarian, just like the fifth line's the general. And so being a 5-1, you influence others during a time of crisis in areas where you're an authority. And this is how you influence them. If you don't know enough about something, or if they're not actually experiencing some sort of crisis, you're not going to reach them. You're not going to get through to them. But during that time of crisis, during that time of maximum pressure, where it's something you really know about, you can step in and you can influence them. And even greater, you can universalize, which means you can introduce something into the canon, so to speak. You have that potential to get something through so it becomes a universal. So it enters into the collective. And it's hard for something to enter into the collective. Ra-uru-hu was able to get human design into the collective. But there's still, as of this date in May 2018, no Wikipedia page for human design. It still hasn't fully entered into the collective. So the fifth line is trying to universalize, is trying to put something out there that anyone could pick up and use. That any person, no tribal allegiance, no tribal idiosyncrasies. It's about the collective. It's a collective line. And it has this passion that's palpable. And it has empathy that others pick up on. And it's a transpersonal empathy, which means it's also an impersonal empathy. It's an empathy for anyone and everyone that supersedes personal biases and personal connections. And that transpersonal empathy is going to come across, so people are going to trust you. You're going to penetrate their defenses. You're going to get through to them, and you're going to gain all of this trust. But because of that, there are also people who are waiting to take you down a notch, who are watching your every step, looking for a misstep, ready to spread whatever it is your reputation becomes, so that your reputation doesn't exist in a bubble. It follows you around, and it's spread to everyone you meet. So the fifth line is essentially at its best behind closed doors, behind the curtain, waiting for the right moment to expose itself. Familiarity breeds contempt. So if you know somebody for a long period of time, cracks start to show, and they hold you to a transpersonal standard, so they're disappointed in you. Disappointment is huge for the fifth line, that people become disappointed in them because the fifth line isn't able to deliver this perfect transpersonal force. I mean, in some ways, you're carrying the hopes and dreams of the world on your shoulders. You're carrying, because you have the fifth line of 62, it's going to be something about leadership, that people are going to expect you to be the voice of leadership. They're going to expect you to know what to say. They're going to expect you to know what needs to be done. And they're going to expect it to be practical. And so the more you do your first line homework, the better that's going to work. that first line preparation. The first line is inherently insecure. The first line is inherently an eternal student, or a student that becomes a master in certain areas and knows what areas it's a master in, but remains a student in other areas. So it's very humble. But being unconscious, it's easy to ignore this first line. It's easy to bite off more than you can chew, with that undefined sacral, to overcommit, then find yourself in a situation where you haven't done your first line homework, and where you're expected to deliver in an area where you're not an expert. So the 5-1 needs to have that solid expertise. The 5-1 downplays how important it is for it to have order. Oh, I don't need order. I can put up with the chaos. I don't need that solid foundation. I can handle all this change. Well, you do need it. With that first line unconscious, you need that solidity, that stability that comes from apprenticing under someone and learning how to be an expert in that area. That comes from that deep introspection. The first line is so introspective. It's ready to devote itself to moving through the steps from apprenticeship to mastery, from the student to the teacher. And so having this as your unconscious, it is so important for you to honor that and to follow those steps and not to brush it off. I can handle this. Because you're very in tune with the fifth line. The fifth line is conscious. So you're in touch with it. You're in touch with other people's expectations of you. If you look at somebody who has the fifth line unconscious, like a 2-5 or a 3-5, they don't really realize. They're always being blindsided by the expectations of others. They're always going, wow, I didn't realize the other expected that of me. Well, the fifth line is hyper-vigilant about that. The fifth line is paranoid about that. I know what the other wants from me. They deny it. They say they don't expect this from me, but I'm picking up on that expectation. So you're very aware of the expectations others are placing on you. The thing to be aware of is to be cognizant of the need for that first line process, for that stability, for that, introspection, for really getting to the bottom of things, for figuring out what they're all about. Your first line your first line designed sun is in the third gate. So the first line is always about, what is this thing? What is it? Any of the gates, it wants to know what that gate is all about. How does that gate work? That's its task. So it's in the third gate, trouble at the beginning, bringing something new into the world, bringing a new mutation into the world, something that changes the existing laws, that changes the existing rules. And so you're going to want to know what that really means and what that really is. What does it mean to bring something new to the world? What does it mean to have difficulty at the beginning? Really, how hard it actually is to bring something in. But this is an entirely unconscious process. So it's funny to think about these things not in terms of conscious awareness. If you were a 1-3 or a 1-4 and you had the personality line 1 and you had the third gate, you would be consciously aware of this process. But instead it's going on in the background. So the best you can do is to notice the outcomes of that process and to notice that part of you that you don't identify with, your unconscious, really needs this. So your conscious, fifth line, might say, I really need to be aware of what expectations are placed on me. Okay, good. But your unconscious really needs to learn about what it means to bring something new to the world, what it means to bring mutation into the world. So being a 5-1, it's so important that you bring something practical. It's so important when people give you their trust that you meet their expectations. Here's the thing too, it's not a story of everyone else is projecting on me, they all have expectations of me, nobody really sees me, they should stop. That's not the story. The story isn't them stopping projecting. The story is they all project all this stuff on me, they have all these expectations of me, and I'm going to deliver, and I'm going to meet those expectations. That's the story. because the wind is at your sails. As a fifth line, life wants you to succeed. The Maya is in your favor. Everything is set up for you to succeed, for you to deliver. And when you do, it's not just you succeeding, you're representing life itself. You're giving people faith in life itself. You're giving people faith in other people. Not just faith in you, you're giving them faith in humanity. And when you fail, they lose faith in humanity. They lose faith in people. They lose faith in life. It's more than a personal betrayal. You're carrying the hopes and dreams of the world on your shoulders. It's a lot of pressure. And when you deliver, when you give them something practical, when you help them in their time of crisis, when you bring practical provisions in revolutionary times, their hope and faith in humanity itself increases. They're reassured someone can do it. When you fail, they think, well, if that person couldn't do it, no one can do it. You know, that's the way it works with the fifth line. The fifth line is transpersonal. It's carrying a transpersonal energy. So again, the story isn't nobody sees me. Why do they put so many expectations on me? Yeah, maybe they're not seeing you. Maybe they are putting expectations on you. But that's what gives you an end. That's a great gift, not a curse. It's a gift that allows you. It's a blessing that you get in. You get trusted. You have a key to open all the doors. And you get in with people. And they trust you. And you get through to them. And once you're in, you can deliver something practical. And you can give them something that not only helps them, but that they then distribute and spread to others. And they help others through what you've given them.